I didn't realize until I resigned that someone could refuse a resignation, vomiting out, and I couldn't leave the school. My direct co-teacher got fired on the spot and escorted off of the premises. Hello everyone, welcome to this video and welcome to this channel. My name is Courtney if you guys are new here, and today I am going to be telling you all about, I guess what we're gonna call it is a Hagwon horror story. So if you guys are new here, then welcome to this channel. I am sorry that it's starting on a little bit more of a negative note. Just a little background information about me. I did EPIC and I worked in the Korean public school system for a year. A lot of you guys started following me there. And after that, I ended up going back to the States, working with online ESL, and then decided to give a Hagwon a chance, which a Hagwon, if you're not aware, is essentially just a private school in South Korea, except for it can look a lot of different ways depending on which age group you're working in and which company you're working for. But for me, I was working as a homeroom kindergarten teacher, and I ended up having to leave because of numerous reasons, but overall it was a really bad experience, and I really hesitated to honestly make this video because if you guys watch any of my videos, you know I think I like to keep things very real, kind of reflective of life, of there's always good and bad and decisions that you make, of course, but also experiences that you have. And when I'm doing that, I like to make sure that it's pretty well-rounded and kind of applicable to whoever watches it. So I really hesitated and contemplated if I should make this video because, as you can tell from the title, it's going to be unfortunately primarily negative just due to my own personal experience at this Hagwon. But at the end of the day, I decided that it would be worth it simply because if I had a friend who was applying to take the same exact position and job as me, I would tell her to absolutely run in the opposite direction. And because of that, I think that it is informational and it's good for you guys to know if you're interested. So that's why I wanted to do it today. It's not to bash any particular company, but it really is to inform you guys. And hopefully if you're in the same position, maybe you can just feel very heard and validated by it. And also if you're interested in getting into the Hagwon system, not every single Hagwon is bad. I really want to put that disclaimer here. I had a fantastic time teaching and working in South Korea in the public school system, but I also know people who have successfully gone to teach in Hagwons and had a wonderful experience and time. So it truly is so dependent on you, your situation, personal experiences, and then how you also get along with your coworkers there. So I'm really not allowed to say which company that I work for legally, but I can tell you that I worked in a Hagwon. I lived in Seoul, which is very expansive and I would say a more affluent area. And as I told you guys, I taught kindergarten, I was a homeroom teacher, and then I also did after school. And I'll link some vlogs above that I did so you could kind of see the work week. And if you guys were watching those vlogs come out, you could probably tell and piece together throughout the months that I consistently said that it wasn't really that great. And I was hoping it would get better, and it truly never did. It kind of just got progressively worse and worse. I do recommend going, if you are interested in looking at a Hagwon, to the Hagwon blacklist page on Reddit. I myself looked there and nothing was there for this company, so take that as you will with a grain of salt. Also know that people make posts all the way back to 2008, 2010 about these Hagwons, and management has completely changed. So I would give it some grace to, take it as you will. But there are those resources out there for foreigners to kind of get a feel for each of these Hagwons, especially if you're working at more of a big chain company. So again, I can't specify more than what I already have, but that will just kind of set the frame for where I worked. I think the first red flag in the Hagwon was just being blatantly lied to in the interview. I was told straight off the bat that I would have a couple of free periods because, as I said, I was a kindergarten homeroom teacher, and so those elective periods like PE for instance and other ones would be free for me to go and potentially grade or lesson plan or whatever I needed to do during that period. But in fact, I found out once I got there that you were expected to be present at every single one of those classes inside of the classroom, and you were not allowed to be actually grading or working on anything else. You needed to be there for class management. So all of those free periods that you thought were open, in fact, were not open. So that was the first red flag, just because it was a very blatant lie. It was made clear by the person interviewing and who worked there that those periods would be free, and they were not. So I know that that was a shock to me, and when I was being replaced later on, I know that that person also noted that she had been told the same thing as me, and in fact just wasn't true. So So just a red flag right off the bat that things weren't exactly as they seemed. And you know, I would give a little bit of grace for this, but those are contact teaching hours, whether they want to count them or not. The second red flag had to do with a deposit. And the way that deposits generally work in Korea for housing is that you put a deposit down, just like with most everything, and then once you are finished with your contract or you're finished with whatever the situation is, you then get it back. A deposit is laying the foundation down, and once you have either been there the whole time or you have paid it off or whatever it may be, you get that deposit back. So we were expected to put out a couple 100,000 won each month for this housing deposit, but it's interesting how the deposit works because I never got that deposit money back. Even when I left, I confirmed with the person there who deals with administrative issues. I asked him point blank when I would get my housing deposit back, and he just said, and I said, what does mean? And he said, I'm not sure, but he just never said anything. So I made sure and I confirmed and I said, I will get this back, correct? Yes or no? And he said, yes. And I said, and if I don't get it back, then I'm contacting you and you will make sure that I will get it back, right? Because this is 700,000 won coming out of my paycheck for, again, a housing deposit that went where? And he said yes, and yet here we are. It's been a month after leaving and still no housing deposit given. So as you can tell, it's a little bit frustrating because that 700,000 won that has just disappeared. And I do want to make it really clear that I know that housing deposits 100% exist. And also if your name is on the contract for the housing deposit and then you break that contract, that might be part of that stipulation that you don't get it back. There could be contract rules with that. But in my situation, I never signed any type of housing contract. Nothing was inside of my contract for my Hagwon related to housing in that regard. And I was confirmed and told by him that I would in fact get it back. So who knows, eventually maybe it will be sent to me, but I can tell you right now that it's not. And where that went, my guess is directly into that Hagwon's pocket. Third big red flag for me is that I actually had 2 native co-teachers get fired basically, and also my direct co-teacher that I was working with got fired on the spot and escorted off of the premises. I would say this was my wake-up call when I realized, oh, I don't think I'm going to be able to make this work, especially when my own co-teacher got escorted off. So first, starting with the native teachers, I'm not going to go into too much detail about their specifics, but basically one of them was asked if they would renew or not. They said that they would not be renewing, and so they ended up cutting this person's contract short, which is, yes, absolutely breaking contract, but they made it so that there was a specific stipulation that showed that they could, in fact, not break contract while still doing this. And then also there was another native teacher who had complaints from parents, and they ended up letting go of him without an apartment and without any real notice. And of course, living in Korea and needing a visa to be able to stay there. And it all happened extremely quickly, and he just wasn't kept in the loop, and yet they broke that contract. Now, of course, there's going to be an element inside of our contract that says if there's enough parent complaints, then they are able to cut that contract short. But both of these situations really were not extreme cases as far as I am aware on the native teacher's end, and both of them were left floundering for a visa to be able to stay in Korea where their whole entire life was. There just wasn't any safety whatsoever. When management would go up and down the hallways watching and listening to us teach, it was just a lot of worry of, am I going to be next on the chopping block? With my specific Korean co-teacher, a lot of things happened, but essentially it all boiled down to parents having issues with her. And regardless of any of that, I just felt that the way that it was handled was extremely unprofessional, that due to the parents' opinion, she was let go of. And not only let go, but as I said, the administrative person in the building came down when she was trying to talk to me and discuss why she was being fired in a very cordial way, and immediately made her leave the premises, drop anything that she had, and she wasn't even really able to collect her belongings or anything that she had, made and put away in the classroom, just her immediate belongings, and then to leave. And they wouldn't let us talk to each other at all. I definitely remember being very upset by this because this happened on my birthday, which I know is just the littlest, teeniest thing, but I just remember thinking, wow, this is gonna be a great day, and it just turned into a whirlwind of a terrible day. Anyway, I feel extremely bad for her. Again, there are always going to be reasons behind why they do what they do, and I want to make it clear that I'm not saying any of these reasons of why they would want to let these people go aren't justifiable. They very well could be, but regardless, the way that they went about it, and also taking no responsibility for it, and then placing all of that trouble and responsibility, lack of work, lack of visa for some, all of that on the other person and getting away with it each time was what made this a huge and major red flag. Once again, I just felt like every single day I walked in, I was walking in on eggshells of, am I going to be next to be fired? The fourth red flag actually came on the humble day that I got food poisoning. So with my Hagwon contract, I was aware that you could not take any sick days. There are 0 sick days. I believe in Korea, it's actually not a law to have sick days for these certain companies and businesses. So regardless, I didn't have any in my contract, and I ended up getting food poisoning, I believe by some type of meat, and I was incredibly sick to the point of this is gonna sound terrible and I don't know if I want to put this on the internet, but I feel like I need to be able to express just how bad it was. I was projectile vomiting in my classroom. I literally had to open up the door with my elbow as I was vomiting out, and I couldn't leave the school. I got vomit all over my shirt, so it was discolored because it happened to be the day I was wearing a white shirt, and I had to turn back around within about 2 minutes, leave the bathroom, and continue teaching with vomit drenched down my shirt. So I was told by others that they were being kind enough to let me go back and go and change my shirt. After that, I continued to vomit about 7 to 12 different times the rest of that day into the toilet. I had to go to the hospital after, and then I had to go to the hospital that morning and go directly to school after. And I was taking multiple medications and they wanted me on an IV. So with all of that being said, I couldn't take a sick day from work, even with all of that going on. And again, they were very aware. If they weren't, they could have easily watched the CCTV footage of me projectile vomiting all over their hallway. So it was not just something that I said. There was absolutely proof. I also went to the doctor, and yet no sick days. You know what? I have learned my lesson because that was clear in there, and I just don't think as humans that's going to be possible for us to really accommodate all times of our life. So I have learned the lesson. I won't be doing that again, and maybe that's what I needed to learn. Number 5 red flag, pretty short and sweet, but is flight reimbursement. I've mentioned this before. When you're looking to sign a Hagwon contract, make sure that they do reimburse you for their flight. Ours happened to reimburse us at the end of the year, but I say that because I was reassured by both my recruiter and verbally with them, I believe, but definitely with my recruiter multiple times, that I would be reimbursed at the beginning for the flight, and they never did that. I also, of course, know other people working there who were told the exact same thing, and then they also didn't get reimbursed until the very end. So with that being said, it wasn't necessarily written in the contract, but I felt so confident that it had been because I discussed it with my recruiter so many times that it was my fault for not triple checking the final contract when signing it, that they actually put it in at the end. Number 6, and I think this just kind of has to do with Hagwons, but it's quite simply the workload. It can be so extensive. We don't get paid for our hour-long lunch because it's not considered work, and for me, I wasn't with the kids. I could take that hour for myself, but for 3 months, the first 3 months of working, I worked through my whole lunch period. I would get lunch at the actual school, I would eat it in maybe 10 or 12 minutes, and then I would either be grading spelling tests, grading essays, grading journals and reports, whatever it may be. I was grading the whole entire time and working through that lunch hour. And I know a lot of people there, and a lot of you guys would say, hey, why are you doing that? You shouldn't do that. You should only work when you're getting paid to work. But the answer of that is that if I did not do it during that time, I would have to stay late where it would not get done. And I also know a lot of you guys would say, okay, well, if it doesn't get done and they complain, just tell them you didn't have the time. But as I told you guys before, several people were let go, one of them specifically because they never found that time. And it doesn't just materialize out of thin air. So it wasn't really an option if you get it done or not. If you didn't get it done, there would be major issues potentially being let go of. Because of that, for the first 3 full months, I worked basically straight through my lunch period every single day. And of course, it goes without saying, there's no overtime or anything like that at the end of the day. So even when we had to work a little bit later, if we wanted to get any of these things done, we didn't get paid for it. Number 7 just has to do with Hagwons in general. I think you're going to find this just in the Korean education system. Quite honestly, we see this in all education systems, but especially in Korea, there can be a massive lack of communication, and that was 100% a major issue at our Hagwon, was no communication between management and then us as native teachers. So we had people who were also native teachers who had a more management role kind of in between who communicated with us, but really you just knew that if you got pulled back to watch CCTV or if you got pulled back by the actual Korean management, that you were pretty much just in big trouble. So they allowed things to escalate so high simply because the communication was so low. And number 8, the last red flag, had to do with them refusing my resignation. Now, I didn't realize until I resigned that someone could refuse a resignation, but it has been done, and it's definitely been done to me. So basically the conversation went, I am resigning because of X, Y, and Z, providing very, very, very thorough reasons and explanations. First saying, oh no, that's not how this works. You are going to be working until this time. Me saying, oh, I understand, but I will be leaving because of X, Y, and Z. Her saying, oh, no, but you won't. And me saying, I'm just informing you, I'm not asking you. So as you could tell, it was a pretty awkward conversation of someone refusing the resignation, essentially. And we ended up getting it sorted, but it was really awkward and unnecessary. I ended up having to speak to parents in a role that I absolutely did not need to, and had to handle a lot of what they were saying was necessary for a smooth transition that made it about as rough as sandpaper. So it was very interesting to say the least. I think that a lot of times with Hagwon contracts and just living abroad, employers can put themselves in a position where they feel that they hold an ultimate power and that you have to do exactly as they say. But if you're in a similar situation as I was, I think it's important to remember that you have free autonomy as a person, and that comes with consequences, right? If you leave the job and you don't have another job, then you are going to lose that visa in that country. But either way, you do have autonomy as a person. You can leave the job, and you should never feel like you are forced or required to stay somewhere. They cannot force you to stay and work there. You have free will in that. And that is pretty much that. Another thing I want to add is that I know people feel many different ways about breaking contracts, especially in the ESL world, because a lot of people say that puts a bad taste in employers' mouths and that you should always finish what you start. And then other people say, you know, you should go give it a try and leave if you don't like it. And there's a lot of in between. And I am not here to say what's right or what's wrong. I do think that I'm the type of person that I'm very committed, that once I say I'm going to do something, then I followed through and do it fully, especially because I really care about my job. I love education and I do love teaching my students, but there comes a point and there comes a time when you have to choose what is best for you, because otherwise it is what we would deem a toxic but really truly terrible environment to wake up and go to every single day. And at some point you have to draw a line and a boundary of when that has been breached. I hope that this story was helpful for you guys. I hope that you got something out of it in terms of kind of what to look for if you're interested in signing a Hagwon contract, or again, if you are relating because you're having a terrible time at a Hagwon. But not all Hagwons are bad. People have great experiences. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you're interested of what I am doing next, I'm actually a month into teaching with a very different situation actually. And I think that it's been really good. It's been a good break to understand that not all employment has to be like what I was under. And I'm actually teaching university students now back in the US currently. So I just want to point that out there, that it's not the end of the world, and leaving something like that does not limit your options astronomically. You can still find jobs available other places, and also again kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel and realize that was just a bad go around about it. But at the same time, I'm very grateful for the people that I met there, the friends that I made. Living living also in Seoul this time around was really a fantastic experience, and I did truly love that. I loved being back in Korea and seeing, again, old friends, co-teachers, things like that. It was truly a blessing in disguise. I think those that help you grow, right? Like a lot of growth and strength, but also necessary, I think. Necessary in the course of life. Would I repeat it? I would not repeat it, but I am grateful that I had it because I truly met some amazing people, and I'm very grateful for that. So I hope that you guys enjoyed watching. I hope you didn't view it as overly pessimistic, to just be honest and real. And I hope you have the absolute best day of your life, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!